So, tell me something new that you've recently learned that you didn't know before.
I think it relates to the nature of who we believe ourselves to be, beyond simply the idea of disenfranchising the ego, but more fundamentally, the concept of, frankly, the concept of self-concept and the concept of self-image. It seems to govern our entire lives. And I think that the fundamental realization of who one really is, and more importantly, who one and what one is not, I think is truly at the foundation of living a true life as opposed to struggling through life.
So, is it any surprise that that's the dialogue that you share in the opening chapter of your new book, which, this question, Kapil, of who am I, kind of seems to govern this whole shift of mindfulness, this whole shift of spiritual thinking. And certainly I know that that's part of the deep thinking that you do about yourself, but I know that you look at it from a different context. How do we begin to answer that question?
It relates to the things that one can no longer accept as all right. There has to be a level of desperation or unbearability, so to speak, with regard to where one is. That really is the only impetus to change direction in whatever facet of life one explores. Once something is no longer okay, then a path away from that is sought. So it really comes down to where someone is with regard to one's level of desperation of no longer wanting to experience the things that he or she experiences, or the opposite, which is no longer being able to be kept from the things that he or she wants to have or attain.
So is there really an answer to it? Like, in your own journey, have you answered that question for yourself, or is it that constant quest?
I don't really believe in constant quests, because that very quickly turns into a procrastination. And that's exactly the fundament of human beings, is to procrastinate about everything. And so when someone says that I'm going to be a perpetual student and always continue to learn, and it's a constant quest and it's a journey that has no end, that there is way too much license there to never arrive anywhere, which is precisely what the mind happens to want. Because at the end of the day, a human being is a prisoner to his mind. And the ultimate freedom is freedom from the mind and freedom from the self. So it can't be a constant quest. There has to be an end point. And the end point is the very inspiration, the very motivation that gets one moving in the first place.
What's yours?
Total freedom.
And so from when did you know you got there? Because, and it's one thing.
I haven't gotten there. This is still a quest, but it by no means is an infinite quest. There very definitely better be an endpoint, because it simply isn't okay with me to live in any imprisoned sort of way to the nuances and behaviors and machinations of the mind. That simply isn't okay. So no, I haven't gotten there. It's something that is at the center of my life. It's my devotion.
Well, and I know that one of the approaches for all of us to take is to start subtracting everything that isn't supposed to be there. From your perspective.
Yes and no. Yes and no. What you have just said is a true statement. The truth comes about largely through subtraction, not through addition. That is a true statement. However, the stating it in such a way, you spoke it too easily, Mo. You said it too easily, and when you say it too easily, it immediately will be imbibed as a prescription. So then the people will be told to watch your thoughts and keep subtracting and keep saying, I'm not that, and neti, and there the whole gang of gurus and the spiritualists come calling. You can't say it that easily, because you have to be fully cognizant of the fact that the people who are listening to you are not the people themselves, but it is their minds who are listening to you. And when the mind listens to that all you have to do is keep subtracting, it will then tell its possessor that, or possessee, that, you see, this is what you must do. So go over in the corner and begin to subtract. And that will be its own prison. This is why no one ever gets anywhere. So I understand the spirit of what you said, but there must be extreme care in the way that we speak, because we know that the mind is lurking behind every corner.
So I'm going to come back to that in a second, but let me dive into this first question because you brought it up. Almost invariably, when I recommend your work, and when I say your work, your books, your discourses, your podcasts, all the things that really kind of capture some of the essence of your thinking, the first question that I get is, I think I get what he's talking about, but what does he really mean when he talks about no prescriptions? What do you really mean?
Okay, that's a good question. First, it has to be recognized that if you follow the idea of no prescriptions and you say to yourself that I cannot follow a prescription, that I can't follow because it's a prescription, that I can't follow because it's a prescription, then that in itself becomes a prescription. So it isn't about adopting the idea of no prescriptions. Then that becomes no better than anything else. It comes down to understanding. So it isn't me on some pulpit and you sitting below me and me teaching and preaching to you. We are sitting on the same side of the desk and we are conversing together. So the reason that prescriptions get people into trouble is because a prescription serves only its own end. Nobody can be prescribed his way to success. Nobody can be prescribed all the way to enlightenment. If they could, once again, please don't believe me, look at the evidence. If one could, then the Buddha's writings have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Who has gotten enlightened by reading any of the Four Noble Truths? And there are Zen temples and Buddhist temples all around the world. How many do you see or have heard of getting enlightened by visiting a Zen temple or a Buddhist monastery or sitting and doing meditation for 6 hours a day? So if that were true, then you could very easily be prescribed to enlightenment because the prescriptions all exist in spades. Mm-hmm. Same thing with success. If someone becomes a super successful CEO or investor or an artist or a singer or a professional athlete or whatever, if that could be bottled, then they would just say, well, just do this and do this and do this, and you'll become as great as I am. Well, that's been tried. That's right. It's been tried again and again and again. Well, how many Michael Jordans do you see walking around? How many Tigers do you see walking around? Right? So if that were true, then that would be very easy to replicate. But it isn't true. That's why it isn't there. So we have to look at the evidence. And there's the evidence for the fact that when you are told that this is what you must do, then what will happen is that your mind will focus on the this. Mm-hmm. It will focus upon the position of your left arm and how good your lotus position is, right? And how straight your back is, and how many times you said the mantra, right? And how much incense did you actually burn, and how many hours did you sit for? And that becomes a new goal. The prescription itself replaces the original goal. And now you become subservient to doing the prescription and making that perfect, as opposed to reaching somewhere. So whenever you give someone a how to get there, they will forever get to the how, but they will never get to the there. And our entire society is based upon, this is the 5-step plan. These are the 3 next steps. These are the 10 ways to become happy. All these things, they not only do they not work, they can't work, because no one can be prescribed his way to anything.
So how do we start to get there? If you had me and 10 others who said, hey, I don't need to tell you how much I appreciate what you do and your level of thinking, but if you get a group of us in a room to say, hey, we want to learn from you, we want to get in this pursuit where we can be the absolute best versions of ourselves, what are we going to be working on?
You're not going to work on anything. It first and foremost is this. Take this example. If I drop you into a lake and you can't swim, you are not going to ask me how to flail your arms. Somehow, in some way, until your arms tire out and you don't have a single drop of energy left in your body, you will do anything and everything necessary to get yourself to shore.
You're damn right.
And the reason that you will is not because you took flailing classes before you went to the lake. The reason that you will is because the key ingredient of the desperation to get to the shore was there. The destination, the desire, the desperation creates the how. It is not the other way around.
So if that's the case, I mean, there has to be, I have to believe that the great majority of the world, maybe they're not in that desperation mode. But if I go out and ask 10 very successful people, and however they define success, is this all there is for you? I would bet you that all 10 would say, no, there is a next stage. Is that the desperation that we're looking for, or how do you define that?
Everyone is desperate for something.
Exactly. But very few people ever reach that level that you're talking about, if any.
I think the ones who are sufficiently desperate always reach, either by a serendipitous encounter with someone, either by happening to be in the right place at the right time, either by some idea that comes into them from a place unknown. Whenever someone has the sufficient level of desire or desperation, they don't not reach it. You see, I don't believe in failure. I fully expect people to fall along the way, because everything is experimentation until you succeed. But ultimate failure is only for those who are not desperate enough. I just don't buy the idea that a given individual was desperate enough and didn't get there. I think that the universe is created in such a way that when there is a requisite level of desperation, that things begin to happen that cannot be explained, that aid him in that process.
So I want you to give our listeners, and I'm assuming here the people who are listening to this know about what we do and certainly know about your work because, strategically, the message that you've been sharing with people is something that I've been promoting since we met 2 years ago. Give me an example of a before and after of somebody that you worked with who started to get a glimpse of that.
I don't know where that really goes, Mo. I mean,
I just want people to get a sense.
I could give you several examples, but it I can't provide an explanation as to how those things happen. So it really becomes a fragmentary conversation because, people have, found, an enormous sense of peace, and their behavior begins to drastically change, and but these things, I hesitate greatly in mentioning these things because I don't want it to sound like a brochure. You know what I mean? Because I never tell anybody when I begin working with them, this is what's going to happen. This is what I'm going to promise you. I'm just as surprised as anybody else how these things happen, that they happen at all. All I know for one thing, which is the absolute fact, is that when there is an uncompromising pursuit and exploration of the truth about a given issue in a given person's life, there are fundamental physiologic, universal, biologic, psychological changes that begin to happen. It's mystical almost. I have no idea how it happens. But something within the human organism responds to uncompromising and direct truth.
So
perhaps because it is so foreign in our world to talk about anything that is direct truth. Everything is superficial and cosmetic and prescriptive, that it is so foreign to delve into that sort of rarefied arena that maybe that's why things begin to happen. But they just do. And I can't predict what's going to happen. But that's what I've seen time and time again.
So do you find that there's something missing in that quest? Because the next big question I get is, what exactly is this truth that he's talking about?
So it's crucial to begin with those things that are most acute in someone's life. So wherever one wants to go, he or she can only go there from where they currently are. So the most practical things that are happening in one's life, be it conflict with others, or be it anxiety or depression or whatever it is, that's where we must begin. And so the exploration is not about how do we lessen your anxiety. The exploration is not about these are the things that you can do to make yourself feel better. I have no interest in making anybody feel better. I couldn't care less if you felt better. That is not what I'm here to do. Because I know for a fact that whenever you feel better, sooner or later you're going to feel worse again. That's all part of the same game. That isn't a game I'm interested in playing. So the exploration of the truth comes in when you begin to dive deep into the very source and the very root, the unimaginable root of where those anxieties really come from, without any expressed intent of trying to lessen their anxiety. And that is fundamentally, wildly different from what anyone is used to. That isn't the world that we live in.
Can you give me an example of somebody's truth that you worked with?
For instance, this is an example I give in the book, and it's a common example. It happens with many, many people. And it's, if someone is angry at you and they slander you, the natural human reaction is to get upset. And the natural prescription is, don't get upset. It's not what they say, it's how you react.
It's not personal. It's not about you.
That's right. That's right. Take 5 deep breaths and take, this just drivel. I mean, it's almost shameful that people would, say these things. Okay. It really is, the question isn't, well, how do I not get upset? That isn't the question. The question is, why did the upsetness happen? Why? From where did it arise? And where that arises from is that when someone is slandered, a part of them begins to entertain the fact that they are, in fact, what the other person called them. So someone calls someone an idiot. Something inside the person begins to entertain the fact seriously that maybe you are an idiot. And then that creates self-conflict, because the other part of that person says, well, no, I'm not. And how can you, meaning himself, which is really a conversation against the mind, it's mind talking to mind, says, well, no, I'm not. And the other part of the person says, well, maybe you are. And that creates internal conflict. And then that internal conflict manifests itself as anger. Now, in order to prove that, if someone called you an
genius.
Elephant. No, same thing. Genius would cause self-conflict too, because a part of you would say, you're not a genius. Okay? So if someone called you an elephant, someone called you a horse, right? Said you're a horse. Well, you wouldn't really get angry, because there would be no part of you that would seriously entertain that you were a horse. And therefore, there would be no self-conflict. And all conflict is self-conflict. So that is a fundamentally different approach, because it gets down to the truth. It gets down to the source of where the upsetness, so to speak, arises, as opposed to playing the superficial and cosmetic game, which essentially perpetuates the problem. No one ever gets over anything by you saying, it isn't about them, it isn't about you, it's about them. Don't take it personally. No one ever gets that doesn't cure anybody. Okay? So this does. Okay? A constant revisiting of the source of one's problems eventually begins to create an understanding within a person which begins to free him from the problems he's imprisoned to.
Well, if there's something that I have imprinted in my head from just all of the conversations we had, is something that you said there, is that all conflict is self-conflict. And I want to get to that in a minute, but something was triggered in my mind. How come most of us need the approval of other people?
Because we are not whole. And therefore, we look to any and all arenas in order to fill the holes within ourselves. Professional athletes face this all the time. They need to win. Winning just to win is one thing, but no professional athlete wins just to win. Everyone looks to the game, looks to the field, looks to the court in order to fill a hole within themselves. And that is why the only one who can really play and the only one who can really live is the one who arrives whole. When there is no need, there's freedom.
Is that part
so the
of
game? So the game doesn't become how do I garner and accumulate enough validation in order to patch up these holes. The real pursuit becomes how do I become whole so that I no longer need to fill up any holes.
And where do I start with that? Because one of the things, obviously, the great majority of your work starts and ends with the mind, right? Assuming that this audience understands that each of us at some point or another, maybe not all the time, but at some point or another, get in our own way of our own progress. Why do we get stuck there? Why do we get stuck with our minds?
Because we believe the mind to be ourselves.
That sounds so damn easy.
Everything is easy. It just depends upon one's level of desire. See, there is no difficult. The difficult is, what is difficulty? Difficulty is making yourself do something that you don't really want to do. That's difficult. Easy is the congruence of what you're doing with what you really want to do. See, this is why everyone says this is so hard. And, of course it's hard because it's all penance. Everyone subscribes because, from religion to education to parents to everyone, society has been teaching human beings for millennia that you have to pay, that you have to give penance, that you must suffer, that you must work hard and bleed and sweat in order to get somewhere. And even if that were true, what has happened is that man has fallen in love with the sweat and the blood and the struggle, and he's forgotten all about why he was struggling in the first place.
Well, the struggle becomes the mantra of our life.
Well, the struggle becomes the goal, and that's exactly what we get back to your earlier question about prescriptions. The prescription becomes the new goal. That becomes the new God. Am I doing it correctly? Am I doing it long enough? How long must I do it before it comes?
What does it take to change course?
Desire, sincerity, seriousness, without trying to be.
And what the hell does that look like?
It looks like the things that you've already attained in your life. And the reason that you have them is because you couldn't live without them. And the reason that you couldn't live without them is because you have them.
Do you think people are afraid of this wholeness and freedom that you're talking about? Do you think that the great majority of us force ourselves to be happy with this struggle, that this is kind of the way we're supposed to live? You're supposed to work really hard in the world. Nothing is easy. The path to the top is, paved with really hard work. Is that just the world that we're creating for ourselves, or is it in our heads?
It's conditioning. And there's no opposing view to the conditioning. So I don't know what it is that I do, but it's interesting. Some have mentioned to me that what I provide for them, and they're in a much better position to judge what I do than I am, but what it is I do for them is give them an opposing view, a sort of sanctuary which is the only place that in their life they can go that is not full of the cultural conditioning. When you only hear one loudspeaker, you can't really overcome that. When that's all you hear, when that's in the water, when that's in the food, when that's in your ear, when that's in front of your eyes, day and night, for decades upon decades, how can any reasonable human being be expected to say, oh, no, that's everything is wrong? How can you have to be almost insane to seriously entertain that prospect that everything that you've heard is false? It's all based upon prescriptions and lore and cultural conditioning. Once again, please don't believe anybody, especially not me. Look at the evidence.
So if you just
if all these things worked, go ahead.
Have you just taken a stand that regardless of what it is, you're going to just question the...
Oh, I haven't taken a stand. For me to take a stand would be to believe in what I believe. I don't believe in what I believe. I only believe in the evidence. I don't need to take a stand. You don't need to take a stand that the moon arises in the sky, not on the ground. You don't need to take a stand there. You can go outside and look. This is years of observing and seeing and witnessing the same patterns again and again and again. And I'm not the only one. The people who arrive at the pinnacle of their craft in any field, they have an inkling of this too, because they tend not to do what others do. They tend to be contrarian. They tend to be loners. They tend to be against the grain. They tend to be part of the fringe element. That isn't by accident. You know, the common socializing groupie is not the individual who becomes elite. He gets what everybody else gets. So this is to a small segment of the population. This is not news. But if you walk into any discipline, any arena, and you know nothing about the arena, whether it's engineering or medicine or sports or business or finance, whatever it is, you can walk into any arena knowing nothing about it and saying, whatever are your prevailing dogmas, and I have no idea what they are, they're wrong. Because the majority view is always wrong. The majority opinion is always wrong.
The people that you work with that get this, and the people that you work with that share with you that the great contribution that you make is to be that opposing view, what does that do to their thinking?
You know, you asked me too much about what the people on the receiving end think. I have to, I don't know. I don't know. Things just happen. You know, I don't know. I mean, I hear them say things and do things, but, you know, once again, if I go into that, it sounds too promotional. You know what I mean? And I don't want to promote really anything. It just happens.
Well, you're not promoting anything because you're only going to work with the people that you want to work with anyway.
Right.
So it doesn't really
well,
matter.
interestingly,
Like,
the people who end up coming, I mean, everything seems to self-select, right? I mean, so when people go to the website and they read my discourses, or they you know, subscribe to my private discourses, or they read the books and they listen to the podcast, it tends to self-select for a particular sort of DNA of individual, and it sort of shuns a more worldly, common thinking individual. So it very much self-selects. So it isn't. So the people who come tend to come already being relatively well vested in what in being in alignment with the things that I subscribe to by virtue of having read all of these things before they came.
Well, speaking of that, your latest discourse, or maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, really speaks to that, and it really spoke to me because you've shared it in some context here where you talk about this whole idea of the superhuman, and that all of us are created equal by way of flesh and blood, but it's the heart within us that differs greatly. Go into that a little bit, if you remember what the hell you wrote.
I have no idea what discourse you're talking about, but the statement that you just mentioned, I'm hearing it for the first time. I might have written it, I don't remember, but it's true. It's. I guess I must agree with myself if I wrote that. It really comes down to the DNA of a particular individual. What I do in some ways is for everyone, and in some ways really isn't for everyone. And what I mean by that is, fundamentally, we are all human beings, and therefore, these are the truth about things. Really arriving somewhere in one's life is really what we all seek. But we have to first arrive at the place in which we are desirous of arriving there. And so that is an evolutionary process within ourselves. And I don't know why some people truly are ready for such things and others are not. So in that sense, it isn't for everyone, because many are going to read these things and consider it extraordinarily, almost mystical, and 180 degrees opposite of the world that they're used to living in, and therefore it's just too much. So it really comes down to, we are all flesh and blood. We are all trying to go to the same place by different names. But it really comes down to the DNA of a particular individual that determines whether or not he is ready to pursue such a journey.
But as the old saying goes, I assume you agree with the point of, hey, if you find yourself at the side of the majority, if you find yourself following the crowd, you're probably heading the wrong place. True?
Yes.
Talk to me about how we deal with attachment. At some point, we all face it. We all deal with it. We're all dealing with it right now. It's human. How do you start to deal with it?
That's a wonderful question, and it really, Mo, you have really raised a fundamental seat of human misery and human strife.
I like that. Human misery. I like that.
Absolutely. The Buddhists say, do not be attached, and the gurus say, do not be attached, and all of it's absolutely true. But it's kind of like saying, be present, or just be, and those are really more cosmetic, silly comments. It isn't about not being attached, because you can't not be something. Because if you try to not be something, you will drift into prescription land, and you will get nowhere. It is about seeing the belly of the beast. It is about seeing the eyes and the teeth in the glare. You do not need to fix anything. You need to see everything. So when one truly sees, only then does a journey towards non-attachment even become possible. A person who is trying to become unattached by prescriptive means, it is not possible for him to even enter the journey to becoming unattached, because he will never escape the vortex of the prescription. It is not about what do I do. It is about seeing the devastation. It is about seeing the shrapnel. It is about seeing the chaos that ensues on account of attachment. Not listening to anybody, not hearing some book say that you should not be attached. Those things will not do anything for you, because we as human beings do not act unless our backs are against a wall. And the only way that our backs become against a wall is if we truly see. Knowledge is not powerful enough to make one change. Neither is the empty idea of health. Health isn't enough. There has to be something in it for me, for the human. And that something better be deep. Only then will he commit without trying to commit. He will commit when he has no choice, not because it's good for him.
Well, I bring that up because as we tape this, there's an incredible catastrophe going on here in Southern California that we're living through right now. People's homes are devastated. These fires are going crazy. Lives, every day the number of lives that are being lost is going up. And I was having a conversation this morning with somebody who actually lost their home here in Malibu. And I was very impressed with I don't want to say the lack of attachment, but that it took a few days but he came to grips with the fact that everything I had is gone. I'm not happy about it, but at least I'm still here and I have the capability to replace it. And when you talk about this issue with a lot of people, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one when they're going through what they're going through. And that's why I wanted to get your perspective on it. What message would you have for people that are going through that here right now, where one day you're sleeping in your bed and a couple of hours later, everything that you own is gone?
There's no message I can give. There's no message I can give to soothe someone or to make them feel better or to make them feel comforted or to make the pain any less. There's nothing I can say.
But is there something that you can say about this whole idea of attachment? Would we be as upset, or maybe upset is not the right word, would we be as impacted if we weren't as attached?
Well, no, but the only reason that you're asking that question is because a person's house burned down, right?
Exactly.
See, what I want to hear you ask is, okay, let's say no one's house burned down. You wouldn't be asking me that question.
Because it's easier to talk about it at that point, because it's just it's a concept.
Because I would argue that it's no small thing for someone's house to burn down and lose everything. Of course, that's devastating. It's no small thing. It shouldn't be taken lightly. I'm all with that. But I will argue this. It is far more devastating to live every day of one's life under the weight of attachment without even knowing it.
And I would say most of us are living like that.
Absolutely. So the question arises there. You don't need to wait for someone's house to burn down. The house has already burned down 1,000 times over. It is the recognition of what attachment has done to us as human beings on a fundamental day-to-day level that is the real catastrophe.
What do we start?
Not according to a particular event, no matter how devastating it is, which it is, but it is far more devastating to live 70 years under the weight of attachment.
No doubt.
It ruins the quality of one's life because one lives under fear, anxiety, pain, misery, strife, hope, disappointment, failure. That becomes part and parcel of one's life. That becomes the only thing he knows.
What's the alternative?
The alternative is freedom. Freedom from the mind. Freedom from attachment. Freedom from seeking. Freedom from hope. Freedom from wishing that tomorrow will be better than today, and therefore never really arriving at tomorrow.
Well, we've definitely experienced that here for some people, for a lot of people.
Who hasn't? Everyone experiences that. Everyone lives there. The real tragedy isn't death. The real tragedy is life.
What are some things that we can do to start to live a life of freedom? I'm not going to say get there because I don't think we're there yet, but what are some steps that we can start to take so we can start to lose that?
Well, I don't think that there's a we anything. There's no we. There might be three people. There might be three people who are listening to this podcast who might become ready at some point in their life. Okay? So there's no we anything. It really comes down to not doing anything at all. It is understanding that your problems will never go away. No matter how elaborate the fix, the technique, or the methodology may be. You cannot escape your problems. And because you cannot escape your problems, you will live a life of torment and anxiety interspersed by a few joyful moments. That will be your life. The only way out of that is for what I just said to absolutely not be okay.
All right, so let me end with this. What are you most optimistic about?
Nothing. I don't believe in optimism.
What are you looking forward to?
Nothing. I'm not looking forward to anything. I do not want tomorrow to bring me something. Because if I want that, I'm going to keep looking over there. So if I have a journey, if I have a devotion, it is to become 100% totally and completely free of all imprisonments of my mind.
And on a scale of 1 to 5, where are you?
No, I don't know. An impossible question to answer. I am 5 with regard to my level of devotion.
And is that all that counts right now?
That's the only thing that really works.
All right, well, I'm going to cheat and ask you one more question. People want to know, do you set goals?
No.
Do you believe in setting goals? If you're running a company and you're running a public company, you have to have something for people to look forward to.
I think that relates to why you started it in the first place. What is the thing that you truly want to achieve? A vision. What is your arrival? And that is not as easy as a question as it may sound.
Of course.
Because the arrival has far more to do with the deepest sense of unmitigated satisfaction than it does with achieving a sense of pleasure. That is, I think that gets to the essence of the matter.
Well, that's pretty appropriate. Obviously, we can sit here for hours, but I think most importantly, what I hope that we did with this segment is address some of the key questions that people have. And, I will continue to encourage anyone that listens to our work or subscribes to our work to do yourself a favor and dig a little bit deeper into Kapil's work, not only his books and his discourses, but take some time to reflect, to journal, to really try to capture the messages that he's trying to tell. Because for me personally, the one thing that sticks to me is this whole idea that you said all problems are problems of the mind. There is no conflict. Everything is self-conflict. I've tried to come to grips with that, but I'm about as candid as anybody. It's really difficult, and maybe I'm overcomplicating it. But when I see the work that you do, I'm inspired to try to get to that level of desire that you talk about. So, for people that are listening, do you have any parting words?
No.
How come I knew that was going to happen?